Go.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say hello, welcome you to behind the scenes, loving my veteran. I am so happy to be here with Stacy. We're so excited to be able to collaborate together today on this and speak about our episode that we actually did together. When Stacy signed up to be one of our caregiver spotlight people, we had no idea who she was. We're like, who is this Stacy person? She sounds so interesting and we want to meet her. And oh my gosh, we are so happy we did. Stacy has just brought such an amazing light into each of our lives. We talk about her all the time to like everyone we know, Erin, Libby, and I. She's just made such an amazing impact to who we are and to behind the service. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, I mean, the feeling is so mutual because this journey is not easy. I'm not gonna lie to anybody. This is not like the easy journey that we all think we're gonna have. Um, and especially not when you get this desire that I just firmly feel like God placed right here in my heart and said, you got to do something. And when all of a sudden you're told that, and you know, he doesn't whisper to me because I'm hard headed, so like he yells at me and says, "You have to do this today." Um, it has become overwhelming. But again, I think it goes back to the fact that God puts the right people in your life at the right time. And I'm going to tell you, if it wasn't for Carl, my veteran, and Jeremy, who gave me this inspiration, and then the three of y'all, you and Libby and Aaron, who just lift me up every day when I feel like I'm at my end. Poor Shauna's sitting there picking up her husband from work for lunch yesterday, and I'm like, I'm melting. I felt like the witch in the Wizard of Oz, and somebody had thrown this bucket of water on me. I think that's what makes it different for all of us is that it's real. I mean, none of us are sitting here preaching something or giving you something that we haven't all lived and all experienced. And that's what I think is so unique about Behind the Service and Loving My Veteran. And there are becoming more and more groups. Freedom Sisters is another one that just live it real. Is it easy? No. Is it impossible? No. Do I love my veteran with every ounce of my being? Do I like him? Don't ask me on a certain day, a certain minute of the day. But I think he's that way with me, and I think all of us are like that, whether you have PTSD or not in that relationship. So yeah, we cannot begin to sing your praises enough, and for all of us that have taken this huge leap of faith to determine that one veteran is one too many, one caregiver is one too many. And I think that's where we all are. And let you know, you're not in this alone. None of us are in this alone. This is God's doing. He put all of us together for a reason. But none of us are alone. But I'm
Oh,
excited.
most definitely. And if you listen to, I know our episodes specifically, and Loving My Veteran is coming out with their podcast. It's really great. At the end of ours, we end ours with a Bible verse every episode. So every week we are bringing faith into your life. We're bringing real life, encouraging things to do. So we also end with our practical wrap up, which is what it's called. Things. I know this week I encouraged our listeners to write a word of affirmation and to put it up where they can see it in different places around their house and to read those to themselves into the mirror every single day. Because as Stacy and I have spoke many times, as caregivers, you get yourself lost. You
Mm-hmm.
get lost in the sauce. You forget that you're a spouse. You put your spouseship last and your caregiver part first. And I know for Stacy, if you listen to the episode, it's because I mean her first responder instincts kick in. She's like, I must be there and be the savior because I'm a badass and I'm going to. And that's amazing because not everyone has that sense. But when you're a caregiver or a spouse of a service member or someone, not even a service member, guy who's dealing with PTSD, extreme anxiety, it is difficult. And you, if you're like we are, We're nurturers. And so how can we help? And if we're not helping you, we feel like we're failing. And
Mhm.
getting yourself out of that headspace of, okay, I'm not actually failing. I'm putting my best foot forward to
Mhm.
help the person I am loving. Sometimes that is enough. And it's okay for you to step back and be like, hey, I'm doing my best.
Yeah, I think that it's huge. You have to know you're doing your best. And I think the other thing that we all tend to fail at, and I know that for Carl, I just sing his praises, and I know you do with Justin too. And I think sometimes, and Aaron and Richard and so many of us that are doing this together is those guys are really special because when we've all decided collectively or individually and then became collectively as groups to do these projects, and PTSD is something that is not always in everybody's life every minute of the day. And for our spouses in particular, they have opened up and they see that there is such a need for this that they're willing to put their PTSD and some of their triggers aside to help the betterment of the whole veteran community. And so I cannot sing their praises enough and tell them how much we truly love them for what they do for us. I know that last week's coffee, Justin popped in. Carl popped in today, although he did not bring donuts like he normally does. But I told him that they couldn't bring enough to share with everybody. He couldn't do it, and he can't be in like 4 states at the same time, right? So, but people don't realize what they are sacrificing too for us to be able to do what we all do. And I know that last week's episode for y'all, your spouses really went out there and made themselves naked and vulnerable as to what they go through. And I know that for us, like when we do our Thursday night Let's Talk, Carl and Jeremy and sometimes Damon and Michelle are there. They really make themselves vulnerable to kind of realize that it is a two-sided thing, which has been helpful. And I don't know, I'm sure you guys have felt the same thing, because when you're living in this moment of the trigger or the episode or the whatever, you tend to forget that there's two perspectives. I think that's the one thing I've learned through this journey is that there's two perspectives. And last week was not a good week. Stacy was not following her own practicalness of life. And I was pushing buttons. Part of it was just out of frustration, and part of it was my personal issues, and you know, so he would say something, I would say something back, and we got nowhere. And so that led me to this week's series that we're doing in the morning at 9 every day at 9 Monday through Friday. We do walking in my shoes, and what it's designed to do is to teach us to walk in the other one's shoes a little bit. And so often we hear us as caregivers saying, I'm walking in, I'm trying this and they're not doing, and I'm trying and they're, well, it took me a long time. I should have a big old bruise here from where I hit my head into the wall doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I learned that if I change something about me and my approach, it changes him in the long run and how we communicate. And it's been a good thing. And because of that, Carl has seen that if he changes his approach to me sometimes, I don't react negatively. And so it is working both ways. And now, our life is better. Are we still going to have our days? Yep. Every married couple has their days. So again, I think you also have to step out. And I've said this is like my biggest pet peeve. You have to step out of that caregiver role, step into it when you need to be the caregiver, and step out of it when you need to be their partner and their spouse. And there, we get so wrapped up in our caregiver duties that we forget what the spouse duties are. And I'm not talking about cleaning house or picking up their socks. I'm talking about, being the person that we fell in love with. We forget that sometimes. I think that's a big deal. And that's kind of where we are with talking to people. Let you remember
Yeah,
that.
and I love how she approached it this morning. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I believe how Erin said it this morning when we were having our coffee, she did the exact same thing that you just said. She stepped back and said, how can I approach this different? We just came out of neither of us sleeping. We were both on edge. We both couldn't get happy. Our moods were crappy. And so this morning, she woke up, wrote her husband this sweet little love note with in it. And that's what she said. She had to get back to the person her husband fell in love with and remember who that was. And it is. And we do forget that. And I think because I've noticed it in my relationship too, like you have with Carl, when I have taken it upon myself to change how I'm approaching things, or instead of snapping when I feel like, because I'll get you juice. Go get Addison to help you. I'll be out in a minute.
A full-time mother,
Okay?
caregiver.
Sorry, my little one wants juice, everyone.
I love it.
There she is. Hey, say hi, Allie Mae. She has blue Oreo frosting on her eyebrow. She decorated herself from Oreos.
I ate my Oreos. I did not wear the icing. Thank you.
Go ask Addison for juice really quick. Or sit with me. We also have to, kids. I mean, it's really hard to sometimes with kids to remember that as well is being able to juggle when a trigger happens. Do we protect our kids? How do we shield them from the initial part of that? Because I mean, all of us across our two different organizations, we have kids spanning the age groups. And it's been helpful for me because I have the youngest out of everyone to hear from all of you about how you guys protected them, but how to help your spouse remember children and that they don't understand these triggers. They don't understand that they're also a type of caregiver to these veterans. And I think that's also important.
It is. And on Thursday night last week, I was so excited. We had a spouse on. And so the spouse, as we're talking to her, she comes back on to us and says, my daughter is here. And so her daughter wanted to say, how can I help my dad? What can I do to help my dad? And, you know, we all have our little aha moments that something is clicking or we're doing something right or that things are happening right. And for a kid to say, a daughter to say, what can I do to help my dad? And take ownership as this is still a family. What can I do? And so I'm really excited. I've gotten a message back that they went fishing together. And I think that's kind of cool. And she hates fishing, but she sucked it up and went fishing. And I think that's kind of cool because we're teaching the whole picture here. And we're learning from each other. And the best part about it it wasn't myself or Carl or Damon or Michelle giving her this advice. It was another spouse who came on to get support. So when you see this community come together, which I think I was the spouse of a veteran, not this one at the time, but he was active duty. And I think that as a military spouse, there is so much support in that military while you're active structure. But again, when you're no longer active duty military and you're no longer the active duty spouse, it's like turning your ID card and have a nice day, right? And so you don't have that sense of closeness or family. You know, my spouse was on a naval base, and at one given time, he was on a carrier. 5,000 people left that base at one given time to go out to sea. And now there's 5,000 spouses and all of their children that are here. Well, we were all in the same boat at that time. You know, so we all felt the sense of of loss and separation. And we were all going through the same anxiety, but we were doing it in the confines of a military base. So everybody was doing it, right? And it was like go to McDonald's, and my kids could talk to other kids whose daddy was gone, and they supported each other. But when you get out and you're all over the country and you're not living in the confines of that military community that is your sense of security, now all of a sudden you're dealing with people who don't get it. My mom was a military brat kid, and she gets it probably more than most people. But it's hard to talk to your family who doesn't get it because they're not living. And you can't bring up those bad moments, those trigger moments to other people, because then they just look at the whole negative and they always judge them in that negative. So one of the things we're really encouraging people is to reach out to other spouses, other caregivers, other partners, other military, other, because if you reach out to your friends and family, the preconceived idea in the, as I like to call it, the real world, and I hate that terminology, is that all people with PTSD are violent and you're going to end up dead. I mean, and that's the way the world looks at it. So part of our mission is to change that attitude as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I like some of my favorite things of yours are that you've been kicked out of spouse groups for being too positive, which is so funny to me because you and I apparently were on like every single spouse group together and didn't know it until recently. But
Yeah.
I've noticed that was one of the things that we talked about when we were talking about this episode is I noticed the same things. It was all these spouses and wives and caregivers out there who are just constantly talking about the negative, the negative, the negative, the negative, negative. And if you're stuck in a negative mindset constantly, if you're out there seeking other people to validate the negativity instead of listening to the people who are trying to put the positivity because they understand from a positive aspect, in those groups, it's just the dynamic is so it's interesting. I'm going to say this and people might get mad. It reminds me of the TV show like Army Wives, how they always classify like everyone is so catty. And like if you're not a part of the cool group, then no, you're too positive. You can't hang out with us. Like, oh my gosh, you might change our minds. That's so terrible.
Yeah.
But that's why we were so happy when you came on because we're like, yes, it's someone like us. And that's why we've loved every person we've interviewed because each of us were like, no, this is about community. This is about bringing together people, locking arms, creating a positive movement, creating positive awareness of PTSD, of suicide, anxiety, of all of this. And it's not just from the military standpoint, because caregivers, as you and I have talked about, we also suffer with suicidal ideation, with suicidal thoughts. Some of us have attempted, some of us haven't, but it's there because we're just as mentally stuck in this rotation with our veteran. And when you've married someone or been with someone long enough, you'll start to realize that some of their weird little things now become your weird little things. Mm-hmm. So I've noticed since becoming with Justin, I used to not mind big crowds at all. And now I absolutely hate big crowds. I don't like being around a lot of people. My anxiety spikes. I get triggered by loud popping sounds, just crazy, but it happens. And it's okay for us to allow it to happen, but to sit there and constantly say it's something bad. What are you saying about your spouse? If something is always bad, and if you're always finding something wrong, when are you ever going to see the love that you had?
Yeah. And I think we get very blinded by that. We get, and I hate to say this because this is like the most horrible thing ever, but negativity breeds negativity. It is so much easier. I think that's why we've seen such a big deal in the bully movement, So social media plays a huge role in my mind in bullying. I mean, when I was in school, and this will tell you I'm like old, so just understand. But when I was in school, if you didn't like somebody, you were going to meet them at the dugout, handle the problem, and in an hour you were friends. Okay, the whole world didn't necessarily go. You might have had 6 or 7 people there, but in an hour you were friends. Well, now we have social media, and it there's a lot of good in social media. Don't get me wrong, especially when COVID happened and we couldn't talk, and now we have the luxury of having Zoom. And my God, I feel like I've known you forever, and we've only ever met on Zoom. And I ride by your house like all the time at Jacksonville. But you know, it has got a lot of positive, but it's got a lot of negative, and negativity breeds negativity. So we have to use the social media and the outlets that are available to us to breed positive. And so I have a tally board that Carl keeps for me, and he wants to know how many groups have I been banned from. He calls it my victories. And how many of my lives in the morning, my walking with walking in my shoes live, has Facebook taken down that I've had to put back up. So, um, those are my victory boards. So it's like, okay, if you're doing something right, they're going to get rid of you because you're not fitting into the mainstream. So the negativity breeds negativity. Negativity breeds fear. Fear breeds isolation. When you're isolated and afraid, people take control. And I think that's part of what causes our veterans to spiral out of control, is that they went to other countries and saw this firsthand, what we are doing to our own country. The isolation, the negativity, the all the protest of burning flags and getting caught up in negative. And I go back to, probably, if I had to say, the most eye-opening thing I did ever was the 4 photos. And I know we've talked about that a lot. I took 2 pictures from the United States of events, and a picture from Iraq, and a picture from Afghanistan. And we have shared that with numerous veterans who couldn't tell me which were taken where. So we've brought that horror to their home. And so I just think that all that negativity just keeps breeding here, and we have to put an end to that negativity. And we're going to do it not by locking arms and standing face to face against the police officers and the guys who, we got to back the blue. And I'm sorry for my little political thing. I'm a first responder, been a paramedic for 20 years, and had a gun pulled in my face. And had that police officer not have shown up, I wouldn't be here to have this conversation with you. So we're going to have to lock arm in arms, and we're going to have to stand in front of them, not face to face. And the same thing with our veterans. We just need to lock arms and say, you guys can say or do what you want, but these guys protected us, and it's our turn to protect them. And anybody in the whole community, the veteran and their spouse community, if you're down today, we're not judging you. We're going to lock arm in arm, and we're going to stand around you, and we're going to protect you. And then somebody's going to be there to pick you up and uplift you. And that's where we have to be as a community here, and then it will spread to as a country and as a nation. We let one atheist take the Pledge of Allegiance out of the school and prayer. One atheist. One. So I'm going to get on political things, Sean. We're going to get kicked off every social media there is.
We are, except for Parler. That's okay. I'm okay with that.
Oh, well, all right. So I'll go set up my Parler account this afternoon.
Yeah. See, we have so many friends, exactly, who are law enforcement officers. They're also veterans. They're still active duty. They're in the National Guard. My husband has been a firefighter for years. And so, of course, we've worked closely with law enforcement. And when we lived in Montana, we used to take them out fishing and hunting. Same with veterans and firefighters. So, exactly, it is very interesting in this day and age, because we do talk about this in the episode, because and we talked about it in our last episode too, with our September 11th episode with our husbands, about coming and fighting for a country, going overseas, losing your brother and sisters in arms, and now you look around and our country looks like a third world country in some of these states, in some of these cities. And it's deplorable. Like, you want to call us deplorable?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm like, really.
Mm-mm. No.
Yeah, and I think that we see so much, and being a paramedic on the street in Savannah, Georgia, was probably the most eye-opening and humbling thing as to what our veterans go through. And the homeless population there is huge, and so many of them are veterans. And at the time, I was active in picking them up off the street, and you know my story that I think it's actually in the episode where I gave one a shower because that's what he really wanted was a bath. At the same time, we're talking about allowing all these people into our country and spending billions of dollars to take care of somebody else when we got so many homeless. 40% or so of what served this country to let you have the right to say you want to give somebody from somewhere else a bath that we can't give a bath to. It breaks my heart, and I think it makes me sad, and I really wish that everybody could just load up and go on a bus tour with me to visit the homeless and hear their stories and how they got there, especially the veterans who got there, because you know we reform so much, but they can't get their medicine. You can't walk into the VA clinic and get your medicine anymore. You can't do it with COVID, especially. So how are these people getting their medications? They're not. So they're losing everything. They're going to the streets. They're self-medicating with alcohol and with whatever drugs are on the street because it gives them some sense of peace. And how do you break that cycle? And these are people who literally slept covered up in sand for 9 months to make sure that we could ride around Savannah and go walk down River Street and have a beer. So yeah, it irritates me. And I get on my little high horse, and that's kind of where this passion has come from, because we we treat dogs better than we treat our homeless. And more importantly, you know, and I know there's still a lot of them out there, and we really talk about Iraq and Afghanistan, and then there's the peacekeeping missions. But you know, I really have to stand up and salute the Vietnam veterans who came together to form their own groups, who brought PTSD to the forefront, and people didn't want to hear it. And these were the group of people, when they got off the plane, people spat on them. And they were there doing a job that they didn't necessarily want to do. Those guys were drafted. You know, they were working the family business, they were living their life goals, and they were told, look, your life doesn't matter. You're going, or you're going wherever. And when we brought them home, nobody wanted them. At least our generation of veterans volunteered for this. These guys didn't, but I respect them so much for being the forefront. But, and we've seen so much in veterans, in the Vietnam era veteran turn, but that's because they joined together. So if we don't learn to join together, what's everybody else going to do? It just,
Yeah.
you know, we could talk like till your next podcast comes out. I mean, that's how long you and I could have a conversation. Because we have
I
so much to say.
know, but that's wonderful. And you spoke about Tyler up in Savannah and how he has created mini home villages for homeless veterans, which has been a passion of mine. And I've been wanting to do it forever because of the same reasons. And when we lived in Seattle for commercial dive school for Justin, the homeless population in Seattle is astronomical as well. And it's moving north, it's moving out of the city. We lived 36 miles north and we still had so many issues. And part of the issue too, but with Washington, is the VA benefits that our veterans are coming home with. If they go through a nasty divorce, their exes can take every single cent of their disability money and they won't see a dime. They'll end up homeless and their wives will get $2,000 a month.
Yeah, I mean the system is very broke, and you brought up Tyler, and I just have to say there are so many people like Tyler out there, and we need more of them. Tyler Merritt, for those of you who don't know, is the founder of Nine Line Apparel. Him and his brother and his wife started making t-shirts in a garage and doing t-shirts in the garage. Tyler Merritt is a bronze medal recipient. He graduated from West Point. He was the Apache helicopter pilots that flew in under special missions to get service members out. He had a friend who was serving in Afghanistan who lost 3 limbs. And the man had no home after he got through at Walter Reed in the rehab. He had no home. So Tyler and these guys literally made shirts in their garage and mailed them out from the garage, okay, to be able to fund to build this man a home, fully accessible home. And so a year later, they founded the 9Live Foundation, which is 100% volunteer. Everybody who serves on their board is volunteer. Everything they do is volunteer. So every dime the 9Live Foundation raises doesn't even cover overhead for their staff. It literally goes back to the community. So people would apply for 9Live and they would do one veteran at a time because that was their answer. Well, then when Tyler became aware of the homeless population, they created what's called Veterans Village. I'm so excited. I can't wait. It's just so amazing. They are 77 tiny houses in Savannah, Georgia. They're building one in Brunswick, and they'll just keep expanding. They're self-sufficient. They're solar powered. They've partnered with vocational and technical colleges. The veterans can't live there for free. Tyler has never, even the veterans who work for him just can't. I mean, they always have to work for him, and he uplifts them and empowers them and gives them a hand up instead of a hand out. So they learn this technical trade. They learn to save money. They learn how to grow their own vegetables and self-sustain. And then they've worked with banks and all to get them their own homes as they move on. So right now there are 77 less homeless veterans sleeping on the streets in Savannah, Georgia, thanks to the 9Live and 9Live Foundation. And what people don't know about Tyler is that when COVID started, and I was an EMT in Savannah at the time when it kind of started, and our paramedic in Savannah, we couldn't get masks. There weren't any to be found. And Tyler Merritt shut down 9Live Apparel for making clothing, make masks for the first responders and the hospitals. And he got together some of the best to come up with supplemental masks that are actually rated better than the N95. It was on Fox News. And through all of it, the federal government didn't go forward with that because they gave it to like Ford or whatever. So that's why you can't buy a truck, because we decided to let Ford and them do this stuff and not local veteran business who just love this community. But what Tyler has done has just been phenomenal. And we need more Tyler Merritts in this world. And I think there are a lot of people like Tyler who want to do this. Not only does he hire, he's gone from his garage, by the way, to a 60,000 square foot building outside of Savannah. But not only does he do that, he has gotten with a group and autistic people who have autism, he has hired them and put them in repetitive jobs so that they now also feel empowered. And so that kind of reaching out and community is just is what it's about. And as first responders and nurses and veterans, he gives all of us a discount for us for doing our job and loving our country. I just don't think you can get better than that. And they have officially partnered now with Black Rifle Coffee, which makes me super happy. Because I promise you, girlfriend will never spend another dollar in that other coffee place. I will drive to Savannah, Georgia to get me a Liberty Bell with Black Rifle Coffee.
See, and I've heard some good things about Liberty Bell too. Like my coffee does not end on the West Coast.
Yeah, they make their Black Rifle Coffee makes a drink called a Liberty Bell, and it is without a doubt one of the best coffees I have ever drank. And even Black Rifle will do the same thing as far as discounting to first responders and people who've given. So yeah, I love me some Black Rifle.
We do too. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for doing this and hopping on and doing a not recap.
Let's talk about this again.
I am so excited though, because I feel like when people can see how we interact and when we can actually show people our smiles and behind the scenes, it brings them into our community a lot more.
It does. And I think that the biggest thing we have to say is that when we're doing this, we're not fake. When I called you yesterday in tears, I was having a meltdown. I was not fake. Okay. It was real. This morning when we were on with coffee with Erin, we all knew that Erin was in a place. It's because she wasn't her normal Erin self. And we're like, all right, baby, what's wrong? And so we know we have our up days and we know we have our down days and we are still there and love each other in spite of those days. And, most people don't know my whole struggle. And one day I will totally share that health struggle with the world. But um, I have these girls praying for me every single day, every day. And when I left Jacksonville for some tests, and we were worried about how my veteran would feel being isolated from me for the length of that test, Justin and Carl have never met face to face. I don't even think they've ever been on the Zoom together. And Justin says, send Carl down to work and he can fish or watch us die. So, that kind of love and empowerment, I just don't think people get. And that's what we need to share more of. There's still good people in this world, and you guys are one of them, and I love you for that.
I'm just excited we get to be closer soon.
I know. You can borrow my tractor.
I'm excited. I get to get my farm on again.
I might even share a few of my chickens that are running around the yard.
Ooh, yay. I would love that. All of ours in Montana got sadly destroyed by crows.
Well, I have one that gets out every day, and her name is Houdini, and she follows us around the yard in the morning, jumps up on the porch with the dogs and has her coffee, and then Carl looks at her and says, come on, Houdini, let's go back to the pen. And she just walked right behind me, opens the gate, and she goes, and I'm like, this is a chicken. And yesterday he went to go get something bought out the garage door, and there's Houdini standing in the carport door looking up this like, I want him in the house too. Yeah, it was great.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. We're going to have to all get together soon.
We will.
All right. Well, thank you again, Stacy. And I will talk to you soon.
Always. I'll stop. Bye, babe.
Bye.